Here's a little behind the scenes, straight out of camera video from the shoot last week with Tyler and the window and at the library. We'll edit these in a second. Alright guys, so let's get into editing some of these images as I promised, using my Photoshop action set and my color toning presets for Lightroom. So check this out. This is what we're going to do today. We're going to start with this image, and after we're done we're going to turn into this. It's a little bit of a dramatic blue and orange toning. So you can go to prophotoedits.com and then scroll down and look at a lot of the pictures. This is actually also from this set. We'll do this today. And go to Photoshop, and the action sets will be right here to download. The complete bundle will get you the Lightroom presets and all the Photoshop actions we're going to be using today, and we'll get right into it. Alright guys, so obviously the first thing I want to do to this image is straighten it out. It was a little bit cockeyed, which is, it happens when you're shooting on the street. So I want to level it. As much as I can. It's a little bit too much. I want to back that down just a touch. Right there. Get as much headroom as I can. And there we have it. So then I'm going to go through my my presets, and which one I used for this was PPE Toning 3. I like the way that it just gave us a nice starter, and we're going to do something special on this image to give you that over the top special toning. We're actually going to run this twice, but we're not going to do it until we're finished editing her completely in Photoshop. That's part of the workflow, that if you do it in a different order you won't get the right results. So we're going to choose PPE Toning 3, and then we're going to head into Photoshop, edit in Photoshop, boom. Alright, so this is the PSD image. We're in Photoshop now, and I'm gonna go through all these steps. She didn't need a ton of work obviously, but I'm gonna give you my rundown on how I use these. This isn't gonna be the over-the-top example of how you can just make everything perfect and Barbie doll like, if that's your thing. I don't typically do that a lot. I want it to be a realistic looking image. I just want it to be, you know, fixed, perfect, and nice and neat. So first thing we're going to do on this skin perfection layer is we're going to get rid of some of the lines and some of the shadows in the way that I like to do it. So for this, what I did was, you're just going to duplicate the background, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to the patch tool, select the patch tool, and let's zoom in here. And what I do typically is this. I grab somewhere where there's a line that I don't really typically like, and I grab again, and I don't really worry about this bag under the eye. Kind of drag that down. You always want to drag it to somewhere where it's brighter. You can get rid of any of these scars, anything that you don't want. And I'm worrying about fixing the details in the skin perfection step. That's the action. How much you want to do of this is totally your call. You can get rid of lines and wrinkles up here. I don't like to get rid of every single line and every single wrinkle because, like I said, I don't like it to look like a Barbie doll. Obviously you get rid of any imperfections there, anything that's bothering you on this side. I'll actually go a little farther with this. Okay. So there you go. We've taken some of the skin issues away already. Okay, so the next thing we're going to want to do after you've, done that to taste is make a copy of that, and we're going to run the frequency separation action up here, PPE frequency separation. And this is going to smooth our skin out just a bit. I don't go overboard on this because there's extra steps that we need to do to really get the image to pop a little bit more. So I'm going to do this again just so we can do it together. Just run the action, and all my actions give you directions, even though you can watch these videos to help you out. Select a radius that still allows you to make out the eyes and features clearly, usually around 10. Now 10 is selected for you already. On this image, I'm going to go to 12, and you can still see everything. Obviously the eyes are really nice and clear. They're just a little bit blurred, which is what you want. Threshold will stay at 0. This isn't too different than a typical workflow. We're going to get to the different stuff that I do here in a minute. So you open up the frequency separation action. Now go to the lower frequency here and grab your lasso tool and just select, for instance, you don't want to get the hair. It takes a few seconds to get it right. Down to the top of the nose, the forehead. Go to filter, go to blur, Gaussian blur, and that's, if you go crazy over on this side, you can see it just starts taking all the pigment out. So I like to stick with something that's, every image is different. Say for this one, we'll go to 7.8. That's fine. Now start with this side. I go this side of the face, under the eye, down there to the jawline, back up. And I typically use the same one. So you can just select this top one and it'll give you the exact same amount that you just used. Down the bridge of the nose. This side of the face. Chin. And you want to do the arms as well. Just because it's going to match the overall image better. You don't want anything to stick out and look like you half-stepped it. Since I don't use an incredible amount of this, you don't have to be extremely perfect on where you put it. So now, on and off, if we zoom in, you can see that it's just ever so slightly fixing the gradients. And that's what we're going to get into in the next step. Okay, so moving on to the next step in the process is this action, skin perfection, PPE. So what you want to do with this is just go to your frequency separation layer that you just did. It's Alt Apple Shift E, and it will make a stamp visible copy of everything that you've done up until that point, because you're going to need a pixel level image to run this next action Anyway, I like to do it like that. You don't always need to do that, but it keeps it a little bit just less messy in the end. Okay, so once we do run this, it's going to let us draw away the gradients that we don't want. This is what's going on inside this action. So let's go ahead and run it, and I'll show you how I use it. Skin perfection. Don't worry about that. Okay, choose the brush tool. Settings should be 60% opacity, 1% flow. You paint white over the darker areas and paint black over the lighter areas. And then you turn off the helper layer once you're done. So it turned the image black and white with our helper layer. Now that's going to help us see everything that we need to see here when we zoom in. And it's a lot better if you're using a tablet. I always use a tablet when I do this part. So this is just a gradient layer that's going to help us see where we actually need to draw. So on this layer, the gray layer right here, you're going to choose your pen, or your brush tool, sorry. And I'm actually going to do 70% opacity and 1% flow. I would do 60% if you're using a mouse, even though it's going to be a pain in your butt. 70% if you're using a tablet, like I'm going to, just because it's easier on your subject. It doesn't let out as much ink every single time. It's pressure sensitive, is guess what I'm trying to say. All right, so we're just gonna go back to black and white colors over here, and then make your white your foreground color to bring down some of the darks. This image, it doesn't need a ton of work. And X on your keyboard will actually take you from black to white if you don't want to click it every time. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to start. This area right here is a little bit darker. You don't want to completely get rid of all the darker parts, because then you'll get that Barbie doll look, and we don't typically want that. So you want your gradients to you want shadows on both sides of the nose. You just want to get rid of any area that's a little bit darker than it should be and is distracting. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just painting white over this until I see it turn into a smooth transition. You want to still have the transition, you just don't want it to be really light and then really dark. So under the eyes here, get rid of that a bit. This can take a little bit of time, but it's worth your time. This is the longest part of the process, actually, and you'll get faster and faster. I can do a complete image if I'm not talking and trying to walk somebody through it in 15 minutes, maybe 20. Just depends on if I know exactly what I want to do with the colors. There's not really any highlights that are standing out too much in this image. So if you had highlights that were over the top, you could use the black color and bring those down. You see this area right over here? Let's zoom in a little bit. It's a little bit darker. We're just going to bring that down to match a little better. On the sides of the nose here, we can bring this down a touch. This area right here, if you want to get really detailed, you can go in and get rid of any imperfection that you wanted to. This is how the Russians do it when they get the skin so perfect. They spend a lot of time doing this. I don't typically do that because it tends to look fake. But it's a look, you know, if you like that look, go with it. Nothing's gonna fix a poorly shot image. Underexposing is your friend, especially if you have a camera with a sensor that can has a lot of dynamic range. Okay, almost done with this part. Zoom out and look at it again. Okay, so you don't want to do the face and then forget, as we talked about earlier, the darker gradients in other areas, just because it, like on her neck here, I don't want to totally get rid of them. On the chest right there a little bit, you just want to make them a little bit more even so it's less distracting. People will catch on real quick if you have a face that's really dolled up and then you have other parts of the body that you didn't touch at all. You just want it to look authentic. Okay, so let's zoom out, and then we'll take this on and off, and I'll show you what we fixed. Got rid of all the uneven gradients. Now you turn the helper layer off, and you have a nice flat skin image. Now that's going to come into play here in a second. Okay, so the next step in this process is dodging method 2. And all we're going to do with the dodging method 2 is just, on this image it doesn't need a ton, like I said before. If you pull it up, you can see we're just going to draw in a little bit of the highlights on the image. So all you need to do now is, we will start here on the skin perfection layer, go up here, run this action, dodging method 2. It's going to give you a prompt. Select dodge tool. It'll actually already select it for you. I set it up like that. Your range is going to be shadows, and your exposure is going to be 5%. So right up here, if it's not already set up for you like that, in your range, select shadows, and for your exposure, it's going to be 5%. And protect tones is checked. I don't really ever mess with that, so just leave it like that. So okay, so now it's selected this dodge tool for you, and on the black area right here, we're going to go in and we're going to do this. Highlight down the middle, make your brush a little smaller each time, because the more ink builds up, you want the most of the highlight to build, you know, just how it would. The front part of the face, anything that's protruding, is going to have a little bit more of a highlight on it than something that's further back. It's just how the light falls. Now, again, you can do this to taste. I like to hit the parts right here of the lip. I like to hit the middle of the lip and the top of the lip where the sun, or I should say the light, actually falls, to make them appear a little bit sharper. Whatever these parts of the lip are called, I hit those too. Down the nose, of course, the chin. Let's zoom out a bit. And you can kind of follow where your highlights are already. But as you get better and better, you'll be able to know exactly where you need to put this. And less is more with this. And I hit the hair too. Now when you're hitting the hair, let me show you this. You see how there's more of a highlight here, and then there's a curl here, and then there's a curl here. You wouldn't just draw like this on that per se and just bring that out and do that. What you want to do is draw where the light's falling. It's falling sideways, so you're going to hit the hair going this way, and then this curl, the whole curl, left to right, and then this whole curl, left to right. You see what I mean? It's going to create highlights, and then it's going to emphasize the darker parts, because the lighter parts are lighter, obviously. So sideways on this curl right here, sideways on that curl. This is actually being hit like this. Okay, so we just popped her out a bit, which is totally fine. And I'm going to bring the opacity of this down, just because I know what's coming next on the next layer, until it just looks like she's standing out a bit. And this is to taste. I'll bring it down just a little bit more. Okay, so on to the next step. Now we're going to run that action again, and we're going to hit the eyes. We're just going to draw them out a little bit. So just run the action again. It'll keep all the settings the same tool, the dodge tool. And we're going to zoom in pretty far here until we get to the eyes. I always click on the mask, the black layer that is. I'm trying to teach this from a standpoint of I'm going to act like you don't know what you're doing in Photoshop very well. So I might say some things that somebody who's a little bit more advanced will think I'm drawing it out, but I'm not. I'm just trying to help everybody. So when you look at the eyes, you don't want alien eyes, things that stick out too much, more than they should. You see that the catch light, just the light from the street, is not very even. It's just, you know, the sun was setting behind the building, so it wasn't a bunch of light there to begin with. The light hits the eye on the top, and then it comes out on the bottom. So you always want to think about that when you're doing your eye highlights. Follow what's there and just draw over it. But when you get to the bottom of the eye, smaller every time. Start again until you get what you want. Smaller every time. You want it to come to a climax at the bottom center of the eye. Usually directly on the opposite side of wherever the catch light is coming in at. Now don't go overboard here, because there's other factors that play into an eye that's popping out. So that's great. I think that looks inviting, realistic, and not over the top. And you can bring it down just a touch. Okay, now on to the next step. Okay, so for the next step, we're going to make the eye sharper. And if you go down the list, eye sharper PPE is the action you're going to want to run. And it's just going to make our eyes sharper. You see what it does on and off. So click on the dodge tool layer that we just made, and then run this action. Now it says set the opacity to 75 and your flow to 100%. So you want to paint over the eye and get the eyelashes on the top and the bottom as well, and I'm going to show you why. So what you're going to do is click on the black layer, get your brush tool, set it to 75, set the flow to 100%, choose your color as white because it's a black layer mask, and paint over the eye and eyelashes top and bottom. Over the eye, eyelashes top and bottom. Okay, now you see what that did. It just sharpened our eye up very much. I'm going to bring the opacity down a touch because you don't want the eyes to be so sharp, even though we're going to sharpen the image in a second with a special technique that I like to use. So there you have. Now the eyes are standing out a bit, and as you zoom out, you'll be able to make a better assessment of what is too sharp and what's not. So that's fine. We're still missing a lot of contrast from this image, and this is what we're going to get to on this next step. So let's go to the next step. Okay, the next action we're going to want to run is the eyeliner and pupil. Now this is just subtle, but I'll show you how to do it. So set the opacity to 25% and the flow to 100%, and then I'll show you where to draw. Click on your black layer mask. It's your brush tool with white. 25%. Flow to 100. Just zoom in. Not that far, my goodness. I'm just doing the pinch to zoom thing on my trackpad. Now underneath here, you just paint the white. Sometimes I'll even hit the eyebrows a touch. But underneath here, this whole area where it's a little bit darker, paint that as well. And then one time around the ring of the eye, and one little circle on the pupil. And sometimes I'll hit these little black veiny parts for just added contrast. So now the eyes are popping even more. So you see the flow in which you do this, it makes a lot of difference. So the next step is what I like to do towards the end of an image. But this image is different since we're going to put another layer of a preset on top to give us that extra blue and extra orange. So this is where we're going to get our contrast from. The contrast pop. I use this on pretty much every single image. It's just really unique adjustment. Contrast pop 1, PPE. Run it and adjust the opacity as you like. Just depends on how much contrast you already have in your image. I think for this particular one, since I know what I'm going to do next, I'm going to stop at about somewhere around 45. It'll be just fine. Okay. And then the next one we're going to run is color pop. We're just going to pop the color one more time. And it's just going to bring out the color just a touch more. And that's just all I've done up here in the PSD that I saved before. Now what I'll do up here is I'll go to layer, flatten image, discard hidden layers, that's fine. It's just going to flatten the image. And then file, save, and it'll pop back up in Lightroom. After that's done, what I'll do is I'll go to step backwards, unflatten it, and then I'll save as, just so I have my PSD file if I need to change anything. Large document format, as copy, select where you want to save it, name it, and then you'll have this with all the layers if you ever need to change anything in the future. Alright, so let's go on to the next step. Okay, so now this image populated back into Lightroom, and this is where we're going to have a little bit of fun. Sometimes when you're shooting through windows, it's so washed out that you get to play around with a lot of the colors. When I'm looking at this, after we've already toned this once, I like the orange. You see the oranges in the background. You see her hair is actually like a silver with blue in it, and we brought that out with the first preset that we used. And the blues and the oranges, we brought those up once already. So this run PPE 3 again. You see what I mean? That's why we didn't want to over contrast it the first time. So now we've really got a pretty stunning image based off of blues and oranges. And what we're going to do now to finish this off and get it nice and sharp is go into Photoshop again, take this image in, and we're going to run my staged sharpening action, which sharpens on 5 different levels. So duplicate your background, scroll all the way down to my pack, and we're going to go to stage sharpening and just run that, and that's all you have to do. It's going to create 5 copies, put them in a nice little neat folder, sharpen them all to taste, and then it's subtle, but it really does make a big difference. So I'll show you once we go in to more of a pixel level here what it did. Before, after, before, after. Alright, so this is what we have. We started here, and after all our adjustments, we ended here with something that's very unique and otherwise bland image. We turned into something that, you know, you're gonna be proud of. So on to the next image. Thanks, guys.